always goes down well in schools. We love telling that story about this roadkill thing. What I did is I gave Paul a drawing. I had the temerity as an illustrator to give the writer a cue for a story. I said, can you write me something set in this world? And I think that set the tone for what we've done ever since, which is beginning sort of stories often with a visual cue and then building a world around that.
We sent it off. I'd had a couple of books published by Random, and I got my editor kind of interested in it. I sent it, she said, send in 3 chapters, a synopsis.
Do you remember we made this agreement, didn't we? You sent it to Random House.
And you sent it to Walker.
I took it into Walker, and I sat with David Lloyd, who is the most brilliant editor of picture books, and I showed him this imaginary world and the notes we had done, whatever. And he turned to me and he said, Chris, I don't think there's any future in fantasy. He said, to the picture
especially
books.
not with illustrations, not for that age group. It won't work. So anyway, yes, I sent them to Annie, and they came back, returned post. And I thought, ooh, something wrong here. It's his fault. Lousy pictures. They obviously don't like them. I was a fool ever to contemplate.
We didn't have a good feeling about this. Not only was there no future in fantasy as far as Walker was concerned, Random didn't even want to look at them. It was that bad. Just sort of one of those off-the-peg rejection letters. And Paul, being a writer, he is very used to rejection. He embraces rejection.
Out. I actually looked these up for this talk. I went through a phase of sending off short stories. One from Argo. Not bad, but not quite interesting enough. One to Woman magazine. We try to keep death out of our stories. And then the London magazine. I'd sent them about 4, and the criticism gradually got worse and worse until this one. Dear Mr. Stewart, we don't like your stories.
So Paul was primed. He was primed for rejection. I'm an illustrator. I don't take no for an answer. So I phoned up Annie Eaton. I didn't know Annie well at all at that stage, but I thought, this is odd, because Paul has had a conversation with the editorial people. Surely, at least you can give us a few notes about why you don't like this. And I phoned Annie up and explained who I was. She said, oh, yes. And I said, could you tell us just where we were going wrong with this story? Maybe give us a few notes. I understand that there is no future in fantasy, but maybe we can go in another direction. She said, I'm so sorry. We had a work experience person in last week, and she saw all our submissions in the mailroom, and she thought she'd tidy the office, so she sent them all back. Standard rejection slips. I like to think that J.K. Rowling had sent in Harry Potter. Seminal week, we went back, along with Jacqueline Wilson. I think there were authors all over the place thinking, what happened? They don't like us anymore. I was so glad I phoned up. She said, do send it in. She sent it in, and she said, yes, of course we'll publish it. And that began, I think, our Edge journey.
The Edge thing's going quite well still. There's film interest. There's always film interest. It's a little bit like offering sort of sweets to a child, and you get all excited, even at the age of 78, and then they snatch it away again. At the moment, it's looking promising, so on the strength of that, we're doing an extra 3 books from The Edge. One's out, one's written, not yet illustrated, because again, it's that old problem. Is he actually going to do them on time? The next thing, after The Edge, we did loads of other things. I'm sure some of you know, Barnaby Grimes, etc., and Muddle Earth, and Blobheads with Macmillan. And then they send you off on tour. Then you have to go out and sort of meet your readers. And promotion is an interesting thing. We had a professional photographer was sent down to Brighton, and Chris has got an arbour at the back of his garden. I live 4 doors along, so it's quite easy to pop round there. They look like wedding photos.
So casually, I live 4 doors down. I lived in my street first.
My street. It's actually called Chris Riddell Road.
Very nice street, good part of town. Paul used to live at the top of the hill, a little bit more run down. Small houses, a bit low. Perfect for writers. And we would meet halfway at this really convenient pub, which was great because we could go to work and get a little bit drunk. was fantastic. And then Paul phoned me up and said, I've been looking to move. The vast success of the Edge Chronicles has made me feel affluent. I really want to move to a bigger place. I've been looking all over the place, and I thought, here it comes. I knew Paul had many friends in Manchester, and I thought, he's going to tell me he's found an ideal house in Manchester, a perfect house, he's going to move on there, and we're going to have to collaborate long distance. No more meeting in the pub, no more sort of long, endless conversations about imaginary worlds. We're going to have to do it all by email or phone. And I felt a little bit sad, and Paul said, I do need to ask your permission. I said, I understand, I do know, but you do need to move, and you've been talking to me about it. He said, yes, I need to ask you because I found the ideal house 4 doors down from you. And I had that horrific sort of feeling of, my goodness, writers aren't just for Christmas. I'm not going to get rid of this now.
So,
carry on.
So the professional photographer came down. He thought it would look rather lovely if we both sat in the arbour. So they looked like wedding photos. A wedding of Pavarotti and the Pete Bogman. We thought we'd actually kind of got rid of them all. You know, we just decided they weren't quite right for our image. Although there was one chap in Edinburgh who seemed very excited and then very disappointed when he found out it hadn't been a civil...
Right, I think I'm going to update my Facebook.
But then we were in America. We were in Dayton, Ohio, and we went in, and there was this poster. This woman, Cheryl,
I think. Cheryl ran the biggest bookshop in the Midwest, which is why everyone went there.
Biggest hair, the big candy floss.
Ruled her enormous barn of a bookstore with a rod of iron. You could see lots of people scurrying around. Sort of Cheryl's, rule was total. But she was the queen of the Midwest book selling scene. And we arrived and we walked into the big auditorium where lots of people within the bookshop, it was this big open space. And we were confronted by 2 life-size cardboard cutouts. One of me and one of Paul, taken off the internet from very old photographs, and then hand-coloured. Only be described as a sort of Mexican folk art style.
I had turquoise eyes and a red beard, and I looked like a sort of wrestling strangler or something. And she said, could you sign this? And I said, well, why? Who are they? I said, oh, it's for charity. I said, okay, I'll sign it. And I said, what sort of charity? Burns victims or something? It was truly horrendous. But somebody in Ohio now has this life-size thing of the 2 of us in multiple.
But there's always an upside to these things, the indignity of touring, because during that tour, whenever my smile was freezing and someone was attempting to take a photograph, I just had to think of that cutout, that cardboard cutout, and the smile became genuine. It was a very hilarious thing.
Anthony Horowitz said a clever thing. He said, have you ever noticed that a book is the same kind of shape as a door, which it is, I suppose, and you open it and you go through into another world. And that's what Chris and I have been doing now for the last 20-odd years, inventing worlds, and we go through into them. So there's the Edge world, there's Barnaby Grimes' Victorian world, and the latest one is this world. Both of us we discovered when we were talking on the train all those years ago. We realised that we both liked sci-fi. I'd read Enid Blyton until about the age of 10. I won't hear a word against Enid Blyton. To be able to read 400...
one word against Enid Blyton. It's a very personal thing, but a very early commission of mine was for one of Enid Blyton's neglected classics. Most of her books are hugely popular, but Puffin in their wisdom decided they would reissue one of her books that lots of people don't know. I was honoured to be commissioned. They sent me the cover brief and a very old copy of the book from the 1950s, and I read it dutifully. And I looked at the title and I thought, that's interesting. It was a different age back in the 1950s. But Puffin wanted me to illustrate this book, and it rejoiced in the name of Mr. Pinkwhistle Interferes. What a fine piece of work that is. Do see if you can find it out there somewhere. It's a classic. I'm not quite sure how one would do the marketing for it now. But
Actually, talking of that, I saw a book in a second-hand bookstore, and it was the Catholic press that actually done it, and it was a charming story about a little girl and her rather hairy pony, and it was called Shag the Pony. A more innocent time. Where was I going with this? Why am I going to this book?
Let's take a moment to compose ourselves. Yes, now it's science fiction.
Yes, I've been reading Enid Blyton, including Mr. Pinkwhistle. And then at about 13 I discovered my first Penguin classic. It was Kafka, America. In between that, for about 4 years, I read nothing but sci-fi, and I discovered that Chris had
A completely
same
voracious.
phase.
I mean, that sort of, when you become a reader, there's that moment where you just can't read enough. It's a fantastic moment. It's a sort of alchemy where suddenly the books go, you sort of absolutely absorb books, and you're after stories, and the more the better. And science fiction is one of these great sort of genres where you go to all sorts of extraordinary worlds, and they're there, and you want more and more and more of them. And when Paul and I started to talk, we realised we loved Ray Bradbury, and we loved Isaac Asimov, and we loved Robert Heinlein. And there was a whole sort of thing that we shared, and we thought, right, that's where we want to go next. We want to go into the future. We want to write the sort of books we loved when we were 12.
And it was I, Robot, this Asimov's 4 Laws of Robotics, and we took that and we skewed it, and we've produced this book, which is set on a great big biosphere. I think Chris could show some pictures, because I don't know how to operate it.
I get frightened when I did this.
Whoa! Yeah, it's set on a big biosphere. The Earth has died. They've created this sort of onion-shaped thing, and they leave Earth and they go off. This was 1,000 years ago. 500 years into the trip, the robots rebelled. So they do what Asimov says they shouldn't do. They actually start attacking humans with the belief that they're vermin and need to be exterminated. The first book's set in A, that's that one, Zoid. If we weren't here talking to you now, we'd be at home probably doing B, which will be called the Chaos Zone. And then we haven't got a clue what C's going to be about, but it will happen.
I think that's part of the fun, isn't it? You begin with this. The drawing of, restart your computer to finish installing important updates. But that's the beginning. The beginning of a journey. It's really enjoyable for me to sort of set out a world and then think about where we might go with it. I'm never quite sure where Paul will go with things, and I think that's why I enjoy our collaboration.
I'd just like to draw attention. This is something I don't bring up with the kids, although my son noticed it immediately. You'll see there the word quadrant with 5 bits. But what can I say? I'll show you some of the more successful pictures.
I really do enjoy working this closely with authors. It's a privilege, I find. I often say to kids when we go into schools, I say, what you've got to understand is that authors are difficult people. They're very difficult people. They often have personal issues, problems. They write.
I have problems.
And they write, really, to get rid of their personal demons. It's
Not a
therapy.
nice picture. Chris has put himself in this one.
What you've got to understand is that as illustrators, we need to work very closely with writers. So we have to be very centred and very calm people, very easy to get on with, very open. I love to see the front row nodding wisely. Yes,
If there's a little chat afterwards, you'll find I'm spiky, a little bit weird. I might not respond the way you want me to. Aren't they wonderful pictures? Yeah. He's a scavenger. He goes out, he hunts these robots that have gone to the bad, and they use the body parts. And we're playing with the ideas of, how many bits of a human can you put robot parts into before they stop being human, or vice versa.
We really wanted to make this book accessible. We wanted it not to be difficult. We wanted the concepts to be reasonably complicated, issues to crop up. We wanted it to be thoughtful in all sorts of ways, but we wanted it to have a cracking pace, lots of pictures, and we wanted, my intention, I think, is to see a chance to pick the book up, have a casual flick through, thinking, yeah, that's interesting, and then go through the Anthony Horowitz door, enter the world of the book.
I've got to say that, again, to Macmillan, thank you very much. You have produced the most beautiful book. Chris sat with the designer,
like that.
Things like that. I've never had a book that's been so imaginatively put together. Pictures crossing, black, reversed out, etc., etc.
I get very excited. I go into Macmillan at the design stage, and I work with this amazing designer. I call her the girl with the dragon tattoo. She doesn't have a tattoo, but she's got that technological know-how. And I sit next to the computer, and I say things like, "Can we make that black?" She said, "Yes, of course." And it becomes black. I said, "Can we move that over there and then choose a really strange graffiti spray font for the chapter head?" She said, "Yes, I can do that." And she does it. Up it comes. I feel like a designer. It's amazing. I don't do anything. I just make these rather casual suggestions, and then the technology just sort of does this amazing thing. And once you start doing that, you can't stop. And before you know it, you end up doing books with purple sprayed edges and sort of books. And
yes, we'll leave that, I'm here.
That's where we're going now.
Since you wouldn't name it. Lots of creatures. We love doing creatures. Chris draws in books. And we take these weird creatures and stick them in the books. And then you lot go out and introduce them to kids. So thank you very, very much for doing that. And that's all I've got to say. Is that half an hour? 25 minutes? Have I said enough? No? Do you feel that's
You've never
enough?
said enough.
Never said enough.